The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the man standing alone before the bench, John Kennedy Crockett, a former mechanic turned self-taught legal fighter. His hands trembled as he clutched a stack of papers, his voice unsteady but determined. Across from him sat Judge Andrew H. Stones, a man known for his sharp wit, cold demeanor, and even sharper tongue. When John began to speak, the judge let out a short laugh. It wasn't cruel, but it was dismissive, the kind of laugh that told everyone in the room, this man doesn't stand a chance. But no one could have imagined what would happen next. John wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't even supposed to be standing there that morning. For months, he'd been fighting a legal battle after his family lost their home to what he believed was an unlawful foreclosure. The bank had money, the bank had lawyers. Job had nothing but his faith, his stubbornness, and a worn-out briefcase filled with late-night research. When Judge Stones laughed, it wasn't just a sound that was a verdict on who John appeared to be, a man out of his league. Yet, as John began to read his statement, something shifted in the room. His voice grew steadier, stronger. He didn't speak in legal jargon, he spoke like a man who had lived through every line of the case. He told the court how his wife cried the night they packed up their daughter's room, how he'd spent weekends studying contract law at the public library, sometimes sleeping in his truck to save gas money. Every word was heavy with truth. Even those who came expecting a quick hearing began to listen. Really listen. Judge Stones leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his face unreadable. At first, he seemed amused, but then John began pointing to specific errors in the foreclosure documents, say missing signatures, inconsistent dates, and a line in the fine print that suggested the bank had transferred the loan illegally. The courtroom murmured. Even the bank's attorney began flipping through his own paperwork with a nervous glance. Then came the moment that no one saw coming. John paused, looked up at the judge, and said quietly, "Your Honor, I know I'm not supposed to be the kind of man who wins in a place like this, but I also know what's right, and if justice means anything, it should mean something for people like me, too." The words hung in the air. For a long time, Judge Stones didn't respond. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stood up, removed his glasses, and said, "Mr. Crockett, I owe you an apology." The courtroom gasped. The judge admitted that John's evidence raised serious questions about the bank's conduct, questions that warranted a full investigation. The hearing wasn't over, it was just beginning. But in that moment, something far greater had happened. A man who had been laughed at by the system made the system listen. Over the following weeks, the case made headlines. People saw John as a symbol of resilience, an ordinary American standing up to power and refusing to bow down. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse, waiting for his updates. And when the final ruling came, Judge Stone's words shook the room once again, in favor of the defendant, John Kennedy Crockett. The bank was ordered to return the property and pay damages. But what lingered longer than the ruling itself was the memory of that first laugh, and the transformation that followed. Judge Stones later admitted in an interview, "That man reminded me of why I became a judge in the first place. Justice isn't about who has the loudest lawyer, it's about who has the truth." When John finally walked out of the courthouse, he wasn't triumphant, he was humbled. Tears filled his eyes as his wife and daughter ran to him, their arms wrapping around his tired shoulders. "We're going home," he whispered, voice breaking. That day became a story that traveled far beyond the courtroom, shared in homes, classrooms, and online forums around the world. People saw in John a reflection of themselves, the quiet strength to keep fighting when the world seems stacked against you. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won by those with power or prestige, but by those with heart. And sometimes, even a judge's laughter can become the spark that reignites faith in justice itself.